The man who moved the heavens before rockets touched the sky, before satellites mapped the stars, before we knew the universe was in motion. There was a man with a simple telescope, a man who dared to question the unquestionable, a man who saw the moon not as a perfect sphere, but as a world with mountains and valleys, a man who saw moons orbiting Jupiter and realized that not all things revolve around us. His name was Galileo Galilei. The seeds of curiosity. Young Galileo. You cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him find it within himself. Galileo Galilei. Narration. The year is 1564. In a small Italian town called Pisa, as church bells echoed through Renaissance streets, a baby was born, unaware that one day the heavens would tremble beneath his gaze. His name was Galileo Galilei. He was born on the same day that Michelangelo died, as if one light faded while another ignited. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a musician and mathematician, a man who questioned the ancient ideas of harmony and sound. From him, young Galileo learned a dangerous habit: to doubt, the making of a rebel mind. As a boy, Galileo wasn't particularly strong, nor wealthy, but he was restless, in thought, in spirit, in imagination. He watched lamps swing in cathedrals. He traced the flight of birds. He dropped balls off tables just to see what would happen. He didn't take the world as it was told to him. He wanted to see it for himself. At 17, his father sent him to study medicine at the University of Pisa. But Galileo was bored with anatomy. He was pulled instead to the language of the universe, mathematics. There he discovered Euclid, Archimedes, geometry, motion, time. The church considered these studies noble, as long as they didn't challenge scripture. But for Galileo, science was not just theory, it was a lens, to see the world not as authorities described it, but as it truly was. Why do heavy and light objects fall at the same speed? Why does the moon shine? Is the earth really the center of all things? These were not safe questions, but they were necessary ones. The first experiments. By his early 20s, Galileo was already building instruments, water clocks, thermometers, balances. Legend says he dropped weights of different sizes from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, shocking onlookers when both hit the ground at the same time. The lesson? Nature does not obey Aristotle. It obeys its own laws. And Galileo was determined to find them. A quiet rebellion begins. At the time, Europe was still recovering from the Inquisition, and the Catholic Church held immense power over science, thought, and even the stars. The accepted model of the universe was Ptolemaic. The Earth was the center. The heavens were perfect. The planets moved in crystal spheres. And the Church approved. But in the shadows of libraries, a new model whispered. One by Nicholas Copernicus, who suggested that the Earth revolved around the sun. Heretical, unproven, dangerous. Galileo didn't yet take sides, but his mind was moving, and the skies were calling. Ending scene foreshadowing. He would soon build a device to see further than any man before him. He would soon face cardinals, judges, and chains for what he saw. But for now, he was just a student, watching the world with wonder and asking, what if they're wrong? Before Galileo changed the stars, he questioned what fell to earth. While the world recited Aristotle, he dropped steel from towers. This is not just a chapter about falling objects. It's about the moment reason dared to rise against 2,000 years of accepted truth. Falling objects, rising questions. In questions of science, the authority of 1,000 is not worth the humble reasoning of a single individual, Galileo Galilei. The world before the fall. For centuries, the world moved according to the words of Aristotle. Heavier objects fall faster. The earth stands still. The sky is perfect and unchanging. Truth flows not from observation, but from logic, doctrine, and faith. No one tested these ideas. They believed them because they were told to, until Galileo came along. A mind that didn't obey. Galileo was not trying to rebel. He was simply curious, dangerously curious. He watched lanterns swing from cathedral ceilings and measured time with their motion. He rolled spheres down wooden ramps to listen to the rhythm of physics. And legend says, one day in Pisa, he climbed the Leaning Tower. He dropped 2 iron balls, one heavy, one light. They hit the ground together. Silence, gasps. And with that sound, a crack formed in the foundation of classical thought. What if Aristotle was wrong? What else might be wrong? Discovering a hidden order. Galileo built simple machines, inclined planes, pulleys, water clocks. He discovered that motion has regularity, not mystery. That time and distance obeyed mathematics, not myth. That objects accelerate uniformly, regardless of mass. He found inertia, the idea that a body in motion stays in motion unless acted upon. This was the seed of Newton's first law, planted decades too early. And all of it came not from temples, but from wood, metal, and falling objects. Thought experiments. The real revolution. Not all of Galileo's discoveries came from the lab. He imagined. He pictured balls falling in a vacuum, free from resistance. He pictured an object in motion never stopping unless something got in its way. He used reason to break the bounds of what his tools couldn't yet test. He didn't just experiment with matter. He experimented with truth. The first ripples of resistance. At first, the church didn't mind, but scholars began to whisper. His students began to think. And worse, the people began to read. Because Galileo didn't write in Latin, he wrote in Italian so that commoners, craftsmen, and even peasants could understand the world anew. And in that, he did something dangerous. He made truth accessible. The door to the cosmos opens. This chapter isn't just about physics, it's about freedom. Galileo didn't just drop objects, he dropped doubt into a system built on certainty. And in doing so, he taught the world. You don't have to accept what's handed down. You can test it. You can see for yourself. And the next time he looked upward, through a lens of his own design, he would no longer see a perfect sky. He would see Risati. Eyes toward the heavens, the telescope revolution. All truths are easy to understand once they are discovered. The point is to discover them. Galileo Galilei. The invention that changed everything. In 1609, word reached Galileo of a curious device from the Netherlands, a spyglass that made distant objects appear closer. Others saw it as a toy. Galileo saw a revolution. He did not invent the telescope, but he perfected it. Grinding lenses by hand, he increased its magnification 30-fold. And then, one night, he pointed it at the sky. What he saw would shatter the heavens. The moon's hidden face. First, the moon. Church doctrine claimed the moon was a perfect, smooth, divine sphere, a flawless creation. Through Galileo's lens, it was not. He saw mountains, valleys, craters, shadows dancing along jagged edges. The moon is not the polished pearl of the heavens, Galileo realized. It is a world like ours. The first crack in celestial perfection had formed. The moons of Jupiter, worlds beyond worlds. Next, Galileo turned his telescope toward Jupiter. There he saw 4 tiny points of light. Night after night they moved, not around the Earth, but around Jupiter itself. These were the Medicean stars, now known as the Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. If moons could orbit Jupiter, then not everything revolves around Earth. The center of the cosmos was slipping away. The Milky Way and the infinite universe. Galileo then swept across the Milky Way. Through his telescope, The hazy band of light resolved into countless stars, more than anyone had imagined. The universe was not small. It was vast, endless, alive. What the Church called the celestial firmament was not a decorative ceiling. It was an ocean of worlds deep beyond measure. The dangerous mirror. Galileo published his findings in 1610 in a small book called Sidereus Nuncius, the Starry Messenger. He wrote not in Latin for the elite, but in Italian for the people. He wanted the world to see, to know, to awaken. The book caused an immediate sensation. Scientists were amazed. Common people were enthralled. The Church grew uneasy because Galileo's telescope did more than reveal distant worlds. It held up a mirror to dogma. What had been claimed as absolute truth was, in fact, provably false. And if the heavens were flawed, what else could be questioned? Whispers of heresy, priests and philosophers scoffed. They accused Galileo's telescope of trickery. Some refused even to look through it. "I do not wish to approve of something which I do not understand," one cardinal said, "and which I do not wish to understand." But the truth does not require permission to exist. Galileo had seen with his own eyes, and he would not be silenced. The moment before the storm. For now, Galileo stood triumphant. But every discovery tightened the noose of controversy. Each page of the Starry Messenger was a challenge to the Church. Each night under the stars was another step toward confrontation. He had opened a door to the cosmos. Soon, the keepers of the old order would try to close it, and to punish the man who dared to open it. The battle with the Church begins. They say the heavens declare the glory of God, Galileo thought. But through my telescope, they whisper something else. The news of Galileo's discoveries spread like wildfire across Europe. Mountains on the moon, moons orbiting Jupiter, phases of Venus. Each revelation chipped away at the ancient Earth-centered universe. At first, there was wonder, curiosity, even cautious admiration. But soon, admiration turned into anxiety. Because Galileo wasn't just observing the heavens, he was rewriting them. And in doing so, he was writing over the authority of the Church itself. The Church's ancient belief system. The Church had long embraced the teachings of Aristotle and Ptolemy. According to them, the Earth sat motionless at the center of the cosmos, encircled by perfect divine spheres. It was a comforting design, orderly, harmonious, and in line with Scripture. But Galileo's telescope told a different story. The moon was scarred and imperfect. Jupiter, a mere wandering star to the ancients, ruled its own miniature solar system. And Venus revealed its phases, proof that it orbited the sun, not Earth. These were not theories. These were facts, visible, undeniable. And facts can be dangerous. The Starry Messenger. In 1610, Galileo published his findings in a book called The Starry Messenger. He dedicated it to the powerful Medici family, hoping for protection. For a time, it worked. He was celebrated, appointed as chief mathematician and philosopher to the Grand Duke of Tuscany. But protection is never permanent. Church scholars began to push back, accusing Galileo of disturbing the faithful, of spreading ideas that could unseat not just old science, but divine truth. They claimed his telescope deceived the senses. They refused to look through it. Some declared that what could be seen with Galileo's instrument must be an illusion crafted by the devil himself. Galileo countered not with anger, but with evidence. He invited all to observe for themselves. But fear is a stubborn fog. It blinds even those who stand in the light. The Church draws the line. In 1616, the Catholic Church took a decisive step. They declared the heliocentric model, the idea that Earth revolves around the sun, to be formally heretical. Galileo was summoned to Rome. The Inquisition, the shadow of medieval power, loomed over him. They did not yet condemn him, But they issued a warning. He was never again to teach or defend the Copernican system. Galileo outwardly agreed, but inside, his fire still burned. He continued to write in secret. He corresponded with scholars across Europe, building his case, gathering proof. He walked a dangerous tightrope, balancing curiosity against caution. A new pope, a new hope. Then a glimmer of hope arrived. In 1623, a new pope was elected, Urban VIII. He was a man of intellect, a former admirer of Galileo. Perhaps, Galileo thought, science and faith could coexist at last. With papal permission, Galileo began work on a new book, one that would present both sides of the cosmic argument, the geocentric and the heliocentric models. He called it Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. But when the book was published in 1632, it did not strike the balance the Church had hoped for. In the dialogue, three characters debated the nature of the cosmos. But the character defending the Earth-centered view, Simplicio, came across as foolish, stubborn, and unconvincing. Some whispered that Simplicio was a thinly veiled portrait of Pope Urban himself. Galileo had intended no insult, but the damage was done. Out the storm breaks. The Church, once tolerant, now turned hostile. Galileo was called back to Rome, not as a guest of honor, but as a suspect. This time, he would stand trial. The weight of dogma bore down upon him. Centuries of belief, tradition, and power demanded his submission. The truth, as seen through Galileo's telescope, was not on trial. Galileo himself was. He had dared to let people see the universe with their own eyes. And now, the Church sought to blind him. The battle between science and faith had truly begun. Trial, silence, and the price of truth. The city of Rome, 1633. Heavy stone streets, whispering corridors, and the quiet rustle of robes. In this place, power did not shout. It pressed down like the weight of centuries. Galileo stood before the Inquisition. Not as a hero, not as a revolutionary, but as an old man accused of a terrible crime. Thinking differently. The halls of the Holy Office were cold. The judges, cloaked in black, peered down from their high seats, their faces carved from the same stone as the cathedrals. They did not debate astronomy. They debated obedience. Galileo had dared to suggest that the Earth moves around the sun. He had dared to publish his dialogue. He had dared to let people see the universe for themselves. And now, he was to pay the price. They questioned him for hours, for days, demanding that he recant, that he deny the evidence of his own eyes. They pressed him to confess to heresy. Outside, the skies turned as they always had, silent witnesses to the trial of truth. Galileo was 69 years old. His health was fragile. His family feared for his life. He knew the fate of those who defied the Church too boldly. The fires of the Inquisition were not yet cold. Under threat of torture, Galileo made a choice. He recanted. On bended knee, he denied the motion of the Earth. He swore that he would never again speak of heliocentrism. For the Church, it was a victory. For Galileo, it was survival. But as legend tells, when he rose from his knees, he whispered beneath his breath. And yet, it moves. With those quiet words, he kept the truth alive. Though he was forced to wear the mask of obedience, inside his mind remained free. Galileo was sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of his life. His books were banned. His name was shadowed with suspicion, but even confined to his home, he did not stop thinking. He studied motion. He explored the nature of tides. He wrote in secret, smuggling his ideas beyond the reach of his captors. He turned his attention to mechanics, laying the groundwork for future scientists. The walls of his house could not contain the horizon of his mind. His friends and students carried his ideas far and wide, across Europe, across oceans, across generations. Galileo's trial was meant to silence him, but in the end, it amplified his voice. Because history remembers not the judges, not the inquisitors, but the man who dared to look beyond. Galileo paid a heavy price for his courage, but through his sacrifice, he lit a fire that would burn long after his final breath. The truth once seen cannot be unseen, and though his lips were silenced, the universe kept speaking. It moved. It always moved. Legacy of a rebel scientist. Galileo Galilei spent his final years under house arrest, but his mind roamed free across the universe. Confined within the walls of his villa in Arcetri, near Florence, he continued to think, to write, and to wonder. Even as age and blindness crept upon him, he dictated his findings to loyal students and scribes. His vision had faded, but his inner sight remained sharp and unyielding. He was not finished. He penned one last masterpiece, a book on motion and mechanics that laid the foundation for future scientists. This work, known as Two New Sciences, would inspire the likes of Isaac Newton and reshape our understanding of physics. Galileo had not only watched the heavens move, but he had uncovered the laws that governed their motion. His house had become a prison, but it had also become a lighthouse. His ideas shone out into the world, guiding minds far beyond the reach of any prison walls. Galileo died in 1642 at the age of 77. The man they had tried to silence slipped quietly from life, but his words, his ideas, and his courage lived on. 3 centuries later, the same church that had condemned him finally admitted its error. In 1992, Pope John Paul II declared that Galileo had been right. Science and faith, once bitter adversaries, began to find common ground in the acknowledgement of truth. Galileo's life became a symbol of the eternal struggle between dogma and discovery, between the chains of tradition and the wings of curiosity. He taught the world that questions are not threats, but invitations, that the pursuit of truth is worth the price no matter how high. Today, Galileo's legacy is not one of defiance alone. It is a legacy of vision, a legacy of courage, a legacy of endless curiosity. We remember him not just for the telescope or the trial, but for the fire he lit in every mind that dares to ask, why? Because of Galileo, we look at the stars, not with fear, but with wonder. Because of Galileo, we remember that even in the darkest confinements, the mind remains free. And because of Galileo, we know that the truth will always, always move. The church called him a heretic. The scholars called him a fool. But history calls him a pioneer. This is not just the story of a scientist. This is the story of courage against conformity, of light against darkness, of truth against fear. This is the story of Galileo, and how, with nothing but glass, courage, and curiosity, he moved the heavens. Galileo in the modern world. Why he still matters. Centuries have passed since Galileo first turned his telescope to the sky, but his vision still shapes the way we see the universe today. We send satellites into orbit, we land rovers on distant planets, and we peer across billions of light years into the past, all because Galileo dared to lift his gaze and ask what lies beyond. His courage laid the foundation for modern astronomy, physics, and the scientific method itself. He taught us that observation matters more than tradition. That evidence holds more weight than authority. That the mind must be free to question, no matter how powerful the answers of the past may seem. Galileo's spirit lives on in every laboratory, every observatory, every classroom where curiosity is encouraged to flourish. His life is a reminder that progress is born from doubt, that revolutions start with questions, and that the road to truth is often paved with resistance. Today, we name spacecraft after him. We honor him in our textbooks. His name stands alongside the greatest thinkers in history. But Galileo's true legacy is not carved in stone, nor locked away in dusty volumes. It is alive, moving, evolving. It is in the way we challenge the unknown. It is in the way we search for answers among the stars. It is in every moment we choose to see the world not as it is told to us, but as it truly is. Galileo taught us that no wall, No prison, no doctrine can hold back the expansion of the human mind. The universe is not a fixed cathedral of eternal answers. It is a living, breathing, unfolding story. And because of Galileo, we are all part of that story. As long as we dare to look, as long as we dare to wonder, his legacy continues. Galileo's journey was never just about the motion of the planets. It was about the motion of thought. The courage to move beyond fear, the bravery to move beyond silence, the wisdom to move, always move toward truth. Galileo's light, our journey. Galileo's eyes closed nearly 4 centuries ago, but his vision never faded. It lives in every question we ask about the sky. It burns in every discovery that challenges the limits of belief. Galileo taught us that knowledge is not a threat to faith. It is faith in its purest form. Faith in the human spirit to explore. Faith in the universe to reveal its secrets. Faith, that truth, no matter how long denied, will rise like the sun. Because of Galileo, we know the universe is not centered on us. And yet, it belongs to all of us. Every star we chart, every planet we visit, every mystery we dare to solve. They are chapters in the book that Galileo opened. The story is still being written. By you, by me, by every mind that dares to wonder. Because the universe moves. It always moves. And so must we.